Okay, everybody, have we had a good convention this year? I'll tell you, this staff, what a compliment in a year when the market is pretty good, the knife isn't at our throat to see all of you show up. I mean, it kind of shows that we have the maturity to realize that even on the tops, we've got to keep working for what we need to get our real market back to reflect it if we ever want to, you know, how awesome to see all these little kids here. You know, that's the primary reason why we moved this to June from August, is so that more families, you know, we respect all of you folks that travel so far. Like me, I'm from South Dakota, it's 4 hours. But, you know, Stacey Weldon texts me and says, when's this meeting? And we're going back and forth. And I said, well, Stacey, it's so awesome that you come. And she says, oh, I brought 23 people with me. So that's pretty wonderful. You know, we've had some good things this year. Pushing back that NAC deal, that was, the earth shook. The global powers, it's not over, but we won that battle. And I mean, we've won a lot of battles in RCAF, and the battles go on, and we just keep going until we're done because our country needs it. And we have fun along the way. That's maybe the most important thing. Like Will Fisher from Valentine, he was here and he said, when's Harriet going to speak? He grabs me, when's Harriet going to speak? I said, Will, I don't know, the planes, the travel delays. I mean, there's things going on, we're moving it around. And I said, but you know, Harriet will be here. He said, oh, thank God. I said, I got to tell you, Lara's not going to make it, so I've got to do the keynote. And he looked at me and said, no. I said, Will, I'm standing right here. So with that, before I welcome Lara, I want to say that the testament to this organization is that Shad Sullivan did all the work of getting Lara Logan here. But no, Brett, you go introduce her. So before I introduce Lara, I want you to recognize Shad Sullivan. Stand up, Shad. Stand up. Stand up. All right, with all that being said, I'm going to thank you one more time, and now I'm going to introduce Lara Logan. It's really a distinct honor to welcome Lara Logan here. I think a lot of us have watched her on the news for a long time on 60 Minutes, very respected journalist, and she just continues to be a truth teller, because I think that that's maybe the most optimistic thing you can take home from this convention, is that for a long time we've hungered for the truth, and I think now America's hungering for the truth. And I think that if we seek the truth and we're not afraid to say it, these kids will have a bright future. So, on to the bio. Lara Logan's candid reporting, often from the most dangerous places in the world, has earned her a prominent place amongst the world's best foreign correspondents. In her role at 60 Minutes, Logan helped people understand the political and human conflicts around the world, including Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel, and Palestine and Egypt. Committed to the story, she lived in Iraq for 5 years. How many tours is that, Lara? One. At the height of the violence, she was one of the few journalists in Baghdad when the U.S. military entered the city, reporting live in the square as the statue of Saddam fell. Logan has earned almost every journalistic and reporting award. Among them are the highly prestigious DuPont Columbia University Silver Baton, the Overseas Press Club, Emmy Awards, and the RTNDA Edward R. Murrow Award. Her fearless determination to get the story from its vortex, no matter how dangerous, has often put Logan herself in great danger. In Tahrir Square in Egypt, she came close to death when she was sexually assaulted by a mob while reporting for 60 Minutes on the Arab Spring. A journalist who heads straight into hostile places, not for spectacle, but for the sake of our understanding the real issues of our time. Logan is an insightful interpreter of international current events and a fearless interviewer, asking tough questions of today's most powerful people. Lara has hosted Lara Logan Has No Agenda on Fox Nation, a successful long-form investigative TV series for 2 seasons, taking on significant topics with an open mind and an open heart, the way journalism is supposed to be done. The series has taken her deep into subjects like immigration and the Southwest border, socialism, media, veterans, and so on. And I recommend them. I've watched them. You'll often hear or see Lara on various news programs, podcasts, and primetime shows where she is a sought-after voice to comment on topics ranging from national security to terrorism, journalism, foreign affairs, and so on. You can also find her on Locals, Rumble, Truth Social, and Getter. She is starting her own show and working to establish the Press Club of America as a home for independent journalism that carries on the principles and standards of the past while creating a solid foundation for where the media is headed as we move forward. So with that, again, it's my great honor to introduce Lara Logan.
All you find is more destruction.
Thousands of angry Somalis and heavily armed gunmen were locked in an intense battle with the Americans.
We were caught in an ambush with his troops along the frontier.
So it was a policy of total annihilation.
Do you think they will attack you before you attack them?
How many shipwrecks do you think are down there?
You've been described as the greatest American rock band. Is that how you feel?
Are you among the last people on Earth to speak this language?
And if you look at the U.S., what are you most worried about here?
This is traditional Yakuza turf. They run everything here, from the girls to the sex to the drugs.
Do you care if the species goes extinct? Does that mean anything to you?
Well, why do you want to kill them?
Derek and Beverly took us deep into the Delta to see the lions.
What is it like to be charged by a lion?
Is that what a mother chimp would do?
No.
Only Mama Jane.
Coney rules by fear and claims he has mystical powers, a formidable combination in the minds of the children he kidnaps.
You were part of an army that taught children to kill, where young girls were raped.
All these people who are doing atrocities do it under constant instruction.
Including you?
Yes.
The most obvious thing when you look at these walls is that it's all men up there as the past directors.
And you went from 0 to prime minister from in about 8 years?
So were you high? Were you using it?
Oh yeah, I was.
And that's why you fell?
I was.
But the bed would be right there in the middle.
Yeah. And you'd all sleep in one bed?
We'd all sleep in one bed.
Happy memories?
The best.
What happened to a lot of the other kids that were on the streets with you?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of my friends are either dead or in jail.
What kind of soldier are you?
I'm average. I'm mediocre.
This is the single greatest honor that the military can bestow on its own. And it comes right from the President of the United States himself. That's pretty good for a mediocre soldier.
Think how good the great soldiers are.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for having me here. Obviously, I've been a journalist for more than 35 years, so I travel to a lot of places and go to a lot of events. And it's nice to be somewhere where people actually mean what they say on the stage. So I think that's a real credit to the kind of people you are in the organization that you've built here and the fight that you're involved in every day. So I want to say, as someone who is on the the receiving end of your hard work, I want to say thank you very much. I wish I could take this away so I'm not behind a podium, but that'll work. So, when I, as a journalist, I was born in South Africa, for those of you who don't know, and raised over there. I'm an American now, an American citizen now, although I need to have my certificate changed because it was signed by the fake president. Poops his pants occasionally. Wait, who's that? Wait, is it working? Okay, yeah. So General Flynn, who's a very close friend of mine, promised me that when accountability happens, he'll get me a new certificate of naturalization, so I don't have to have Joe Biden's signature on it, because I want it to be real, not stolen. Thank you, Phil, for this. So when I travel to these events and go to different places, it's always interesting for me to try to get a sense of who people are and what the place and the culture and everything is like, mostly because there isn't a lot written about more than 40 states, right? I mean, flyover country. You kind of let yourselves get wiped out of the history and the culture of the United States. You let yourselves be defined by the East and the West Coast. So it's always a journey for me. It's a real journey of discovery, because there's not much you can find apart from the occasional Hollywood movie about how dysfunctional people are in the middle of the country, right? I mean, America's become defined by Washington and by Hollywood and by the media. And so somehow you're an aberration. And same, I live in Texas. I'm in flyover country. I'm right there with you. And so this has been really fascinating for me, because growing up in South Africa, there's a light that shines, and it's the light of freedom, and it shines all across the world, and it shines from here. This is where it comes from. So when you're fighting for, like in South Africa, we fought for, justice and rights for the world, for everyone, right? And to dismantle the racist system of government that was in place called apartheid. Well, when you're fighting for that, your inspiration and your strength comes from here. So you don't know that because you're born into it. But I know it because I was born in this little piece of ground, on the tip of Africa that doesn't really mean a whole lot necessarily to all of you, but I think we had more gold than anyone, didn't we? And a lot of diamonds that now stolen by the royal family that sit in the Tower of London. We've contributed a few things to the world's first open heart surgery. But the point of it is that I always knew my path was going to bring me here, because I always had my eye on that light. And our Constitution that was written when Nelson Mandela rose to become the first black president of South Africa was based on your Constitution. But I'll tell you something really interesting I learned. Okay, so you'll hear discussion about the elimination of the Electoral College. And I'm sorry for the little people. This is going to be kind of a boring speech. I could have, if it was all you guys, I could have really made it entertaining. But I got to talk to your moms and dads. So, because this is important. So you'll hear this. My family in South Africa will say to me, I don't understand why America doesn't have one man, one vote. Isn't America supposed to be democracy? And I said, what do you mean? Well, you have the Electoral College. You got to get rid of the Electoral College so that people's vote counts. People don't know about the Republic. They don't know and they don't understand. It's left out of the conversation. Two very important things. Because when I was sitting in Baghdad shortly after the fall of Saddam Hussein, I remember getting ready for a live shot. I did a live report that led 60 Minutes to that night. And that day, standing in that square, watching the statue of Saddam Hussein come down, I knew it wasn't the end of the war. I knew that the real war was just beginning. And actually, I said that to the Marine commander who was standing next to me. And my whole impression of the Marines changed in that one moment, because he said, "Oh, you're exactly right, ma'am. I know that." And, you know, our impression of the military being in the media was that, you know, they were all, "Hoorah, Henry, we've won the war," right? That's how you think. You think these are a bunch of jarheads, because there's certain things that start to get built into our minds as being accepted truths. And I realized, wow, this guy, he gets it. He knows this is just the beginning of the real war. That's kind of impressive. And so when I was, when the first U.S. troops had been sighted, I'd been living in that war. I'd been there on my own. Our hotel had been blown up, actually by the Marines. I have to say, they hit us by accident. They thought a camera on a balcony was a weapon, and a friend of mine was killed, and another guy that I knew was also killed, and someone who I'd worked with for many years was injured and taken to an Iraqi hospital where there was no electricity. They operated on him with a flashlight and a teaspoon, and you know, it was a pretty dramatic time to be alone in Baghdad. I'd go. Some of the other reporters, CBS had pulled everyone out, and I went back in on my own during the war, and so I didn't have anything, and I didn't have anyone. I had one Iraqi guy with me who's still one of my best friends to this day, and he left me because I wanted him to take me to the hospital to see Paul in the hospital and make sure he was still alive, and he didn't want to take me because it was too dangerous. So I threw the only person I knew out of my room, and I was living on scraps from the other reporters. I would go around behind their tents when they finished eating and see what I could find to eat. I mean, that's, you know, everyone thinks you made it to the big time. You're at CBS News, you know, you're chief foreign correspondent, and that's how I was living to make that happen. And that day, when that statue came down, we had been waiting for that, you know, throughout the whole war. And I never forget that they were yelling that there were snipers, and someone was trying to drag me down to go to the basement. They said, "It's not safe." And I was so angry because I thought, I've lived through this entire war on my own, and you're going to tell me now it's not safe? I got to go to the basement? Why am I here? You know? And all I could think of was, I just screamed as loud as I could, "I'm a journalist!" And these people Iraqis were so shocked, they let go of me, because they were dragging me. And they let go of me, and I remember looking and seeing the first U.S. tanks off in the distance, coming down this main road to the square. And there were Iraqi men on that rooftop who fell to their knees and started tearing at their clothes and weeping and crying because of the indignity of seeing foreign troops on their soil. And I knew, oh, this is going to go so wrong. Right? I'm going down there over the next few days interviewing soldiers, and they're saying, "I just want to get home." You know, that's all they want to do. They think the war's over. They just want to get home. And they had no idea what was coming. And I went to the one place that Saddam Hussein kept as a kind of almost concentration camp for the Shiite people. He was a Sunni Muslim, and the majority of the population was Shiite. Well, I don't know, they say that, but that might not even be true. But he had a lot of people gathered in this place called Saddam City, which became Sadr City, right? And I went down there thinking, okay, well, these people, they've had no rights. They've got the worst of Saddam Hussein, right, in Sadr City. So here, they're going to be happy and celebrating. And when I went down there, we were shot at on 3 different occasions. And the only question that the people who would talk to me wanted to ask was, when are they leaving? The Iranians had already taken over. They had inserted all their spies and their agents. And they were very happy that the U.S. had done for them what they'd never managed to do for themselves, which was to get rid of their biggest enemy, Saddam Hussein. Right? So my role as a journalist is to see and understand firsthand as much as I can so that I have built a foundation of knowledge, and I follow the facts where they take me. I don't care. I'm not worried about who's in power, right? That's not my job. I'm not an activist. I'm not a politician. I'm definitely not, I'm not a lawyer standing up in a court of law trying to prove a case to you. My job is to figure out the truth and to follow that wherever it takes me. And so for many, many years, you know, I was the chief foreign correspondent, the chief foreign affairs correspondent. I was a full-time correspondent at 60 Minutes, which is the most successful investigative news program in history. They wrote articles about me in the New York Times and Vogue magazine. I was Glamour Woman of the Year. That thing with, you know, she's got 1 Emmy. I have about, I don't know, 12, 13 Emmys. I have almost every award in the TV business. And they hate that because they want to say she used to be a great journalist and now she's not. Because somehow I forgot everything that I learned along the way and I went crazy. It's so funny because when I was reporting on, you know, Bush and calling out Rumsfeld from that rooftop in Baghdad, you know, and doing and embedding with the Taliban in Afghanistan, sitting down with child bomb specialists, and you know, when I was doing that, I was a hero. And when I carried on doing exactly what I'd been doing before, then suddenly I became crazy. And you know who the first person was who said to me, "I'm sorry you're not doing well"? And I was like, "What? I'm fine." And he's like, he took my hand and he said, "No, Lara, you're not." And I sat down in my seat. I was at a movie premiere that Ben Affleck had invited me to, Argo. And I looked at my husband and I said, "Did he just tell me I'm not okay?" Like about 4 times. And my husband said, "Uh-huh." And that was General David Petraeus when he was head of the CIA. And that's what they do. And that's what they've done for a very, very, very long time. So what I want to do for you, you know, I did some homework before this evening because this issue of beef and the war on beef is, I mean, it's right at the heart of everything. And it's one of the most important fights that we have, as all of you already know. But you ranchers, you've done this all your lives. I could never know as much about this industry and about what you're up against as you do. And so I had to think about what can I offer you? How can I take what you have done in your fight and give it context and strength and meaning that will empower you to do more with what you're facing. And honestly, so God leads me on these journeys. I really sometimes, most of the time, get off the stage, I don't even know what I talked about, you know, and that's how it's been all my life. I just put my head down and went, and I knew where to go. Not everybody knows why they're born. I've always known why I was born. It's just my thing, and you know, I've survived a lot of things. I've survived, obviously, you know, been in many firefights and ambushes and been blown up and attacked, beaten, gang raped, almost killed a number of times. Cancer, I've been canceled. I actually should do a book on how to succeed in reverse, because I went from 60 Minutes to Sinclair local broadcasting, and then I went to independent news, so I'm kind of going backwards, you know, but they just can't kill me, which is what they want, right? Because what they want to do, they want to murder you without killing you. They want to take the lifeblood out of you. Every single one of us, really. What we are in right now is an information war. This is 5th generation warfare. So I think one of the most helpful things that I can do is take what I know in information warfare and put your fight on that battlefield so that you understand, and not to say that you don't understand, because, you know, for example, Shad just wrote an extraordinary article that was out the last few days. If you haven't read it, I would recommend it. And that looks at the bigger picture, right? But there are some tools of information warfare that I have become very familiar with that I am trying to share with people right now, because I think when you start to recognize those patterns, you start to see them for who they are. And the one question I get asked more than any other is, where do you get your news from? You know, how do you get the truth? Well, the reality is you get the truth by starting to recognize the patterns of deceit. And they lead you to the truth. So one of the things is language, right? And I think all of you know that when you see sustainable development, that's when you want to slit your wrists, right? Because they don't mean sustainable development. If you see smart, you should know that's not you. Smart technology is not making you smarter. It's not making your life better. It's called surrender. When you see smart, you should think surrender, because that's what you just did, right? And when you see things like on the government website for Health and Human Services, when it says food is medicine, you know, a collective solution. You see words like collective, that's a Marxist dog whistle. So right now, today, right in front of all of us, we have a Marxist government in place that is implementing a global Marxist order, and we're just letting it happen. It's happening. It's even on their website. They're not even hiding it from you. And you're going out before dawn, and you're working day and night, and you're just trying to make ends meet. And you're struggling for the life of your land and your children and your liberty. What does Shad say? Liberty, land, liberty, and beef. Right? That's your life, land, liberty, and beef. And within that, faith and family and your country. And you're in the fight every single day. And I'm here to tell you it's not enough. So, and one of the things that you can build into that pretty easily is learning to understand and recognize the information battle space, because that is where we now live. First generation of war, we all know that, right? People that lined up on the battlefield, and then, you know, over time they brought in, of course, guns and automatic weapons, and then you have tanks, and you have all of that. And information has always been present on the battlefield. But now the battlefield is for your mind. This is where they fight. So you'll read online. Here's a really basic example. Larry Elder, black gentleman running for office in California, last election cycle. You'll read that he's a white supremacist. Well, how could that possibly be? Well, we all know that's not true. But if you've never seen a picture of Larry Elder, you wouldn't know he was black and couldn't possibly be a white supremacist. And over time, you may never find a picture online of Larry Elder that's actually Larry Elder, because that's the power of the information technology that they've created. And that's the world they're driving us into. So right now, yes, we're in a fight of Democrat versus Republican and conservative versus this, and we're focused on, you know, abortion rights and all those kind of things that they want us to think about. But what we really are in is an undeclared war against humanity. And we're fighting for our survival as humans. And all of these things that make no sense, I call them a mass delusion. I stole that from Hunter Biden's psychiatrist, who actually turned out to be a really interesting guy. If you haven't seen his interview with Tucker Carlson, you should watch it. They try to murder him without killing him, because Hunter left another laptop behind, and he left it with his psychiatrist. And the guy had it for a long time, trying to get hold of Hunter, talking, telling him it was there, telling him it was there, telling him it was there. Eventually, he was like, well, hell, I don't want this thing. And he took it and handed it over, you know, to law enforcement. But they thought he had opened it. They thought he knew what was in it, and they thought he was going to talk about it. So they tried to destroy him, take his license, take everything. And this man restored my faith, because I don't have a lot of faith in psychiatry in the first place, because I can explain to you their role in this fight. And what he did, he said in that interview, I would go to jail before I would give up patient-client confidentiality. And what that is a reminder that greatness in human beings, when you lose your faith in the medical profession, or you lose your faith in the media profession, or, you know, in the beef industry, or whatever it happens to be, that those people are still there. And those values and those principles, it's like Ecclesiastes, right? What has been will be again, and what was done is, I'm messing it up, but you know the one I mean. There's nothing new under the sun, right? There really is nothing new under the sun. The freedom that we fight for today and the individual rights, those have been fought for from the beginning of time. So what this guy said to Tucker Carlson is, they've created these narratives that are a mass delusion. The idea that you can change your gender, you can't change your gender. Not now, not ever. When they dig up, I told my daughter once when she was little, I said to her, listen, child, okay, when you die, and 100 years from now, they dig up your body, they're gonna know if you were a boy or a girl. That's how it works. So I don't wanna hear about this other stuff, because it's not real. And as I was talking to a firefighter in my small town in Texas the other day, and she works in Austin, and she said, I get them with the pronouns and all that stuff, and I tell them, look, you can call yourself whatever the hell you want, but I'm going to treat you as a boy or as a girl, because I have one simple question for you. Do you want to live or you want to die? If you want to live, I got to treat you as God made you, right? And that's the reality that we're talking about. But what they've created is a mass delusion, and if you won't participate, you're a problem. Because when you won't participate, what does that show? It exposes the lie. That's why we have to all walk together in lockstep. And so what they have created with technology is the ability to have absolute control. You already know that. You're talking about consolidation in the industry. Hogs and chickens, right, were the first to really go, and beef is right up there. So, but if you look across the landscape, it doesn't really matter whether it's the packing industry or it's the media industry. There's a handful of companies that control everything, every industry. What happened to antitrust laws? What happened to monopoly power is bad for free markets? The model of that technology is built on can only survive on monopoly power. Microsoft only works if everybody's got Word. Nobody wants to have to download 400 new programs just to read a document. So it's built on monopoly power. The entire business model is built on monopoly power. And we don't enforce any of those laws anymore. And you know where there are no laws whatsoever? In that digital world without borders that they've already built. That digital world where they want you to live. They want you to stay there in that world where you spend, how much time do you spend on your phone? How much time do your kids spend on their phones? How much time? I saw a woman come through security at the airport. She's putting her child in his stroller, and he was fussing, so she shoved an iPad in his hands. I'm maybe 4 years old. Who's raising your children? Is it you? How much time do you spend talking to your kids versus how much time does the global cult spend talking to your kids? And I will tell you, I had to throw out most of my speech when I saw there were kids here because I like to bring harsh reality to people. And I can't do that. But I will tell you that if your child or your grandchild has their own device, there is already a trafficker in your home grooming your child. You can absolutely be certain of that. And I work with General Flynn. I'm on the board of his foundation with his sister Mary, and we do, in fact, we're driving them nuts because they're doing more and more hit pieces. General Flynn just threw a New York Times reporter out of the last event we did in Cleveland. Literally frog marched her out and tossed her out. He was done. Okay, he is done. And he's done with the lies and the propaganda. He's done with what they are doing, the harm and the damage that they are doing to this country. And in the trafficking space, when it comes to technology, What they have done, whether it's votes or trafficking or anything, they've taken pickpocketing to global credit card fraud. They've taken cheating in an election to global theft of elections. They've taken crimes that you don't want to think about and speak about. They've provided a global haven. Why do we have the dark web? Why do we have a place where pedophiles all over the world can communicate and thrive? If you haven't looked at the reports going into the National Child Exploitation Hotline, they're going up by 200, 400, 500%. What we have allowed to come through the door is literally a darkness like we have never seen in our lives. It's appropriate they call it the dark web. There's entire genres of things like hurtcore. Look that up. I can't talk about it in detail, but you've taken the worst of humanity and you have empowered them. And on top of that, we provide the infrastructure for it. And we pay for it. You know how they say in a poker game, if you're looking around the table wondering who the mark is, you're the mark. Look at what they did. They created systems where we would, if anyone knocked on your door and said, I'd like to put a camera in your bathroom, your bedroom, your living room, your children's rooms, and I'm going to record them 24/7, would you do it? No, but you've already done it. That's what you've done already when you let that into your home. Because that's what AI and all that technology does. And so when they say that there aren't enough resources on the planet and we have to do this and we have to do that, what they're really talking about is the resources that they need to sustain the armies of machines and computers and robots and data, right? Have you seen any of these data centers? The reason they call it a cloud, this is where the language comes in information warfare, is because they want you to think it leaves your device, goes into the sky, and it's gone. That's not what happens. There's a physical infrastructure, and that message travels from your phone. If you're making a phone call, how does it get from your phone to the number you're sending? There's a number portability system. It's built of hardware and software, and there are companies that own it. They own the undersea cables. They own the towers. They own the data centers. It comes right back down to earth, and they put it behind bars and surveillance and security like you don't even see that level of security at the White House. And they take up vast tracts of land. At the same time as they're telling you brick and mortar is killing the environment, they're consuming vast tracts of land all over this country to store your data. Every single thing you have ever done that has ever been captured by a digital device. Every single thing. And every one of us has a digital twin. Every one of us, from the time before we're born. They're monitoring your child when you're pregnant. They're monitoring those changes, and it isn't about selling you a car or a certain type of baby stroller or whatever. It's not about that. It's about the same thing that you see in your industry. It's about control. And what they plan to do with that. When you see a defund the police movement, you might think, what does that have to do with anything? What does this have to do with the fight that we have every day? Well, I'll tell you what, the reason they want to defund the police and work with community organizations. You know what community organizations are? They're those NGOs that are the global government that's going to keep you in line. And they don't need police because they're going to have what they had in Australia during COVID. They're going to have drones that fly overhead and monitor you. You have a certain area, 15-minute cities. Can't travel more than 15 minutes in any direction from your home. There's 100 15-minute cities right now. It's not a fantasy. It's not a conspiracy theory. Oxford in London is one of them. Oxford, by the way, where they did what? They did that study on meat in America, and they published that paper that said if we don't get rid of put in a meat tax and start to get rid of all the cattle, we're not going to save the planet. And sure, millions of people might die, and it'll mostly be third world countries, but what price are you willing to pay to save the planet? Oxford, where they have a 15-minute city, and if you go outside of that 15-minute radius for any reason, you get a certain number of visits, times you're allowed to go out of that, and after that you have to pay a fine. And they have these cameras now all over the UK. Look up this group, you can find it on social media. I love these guys. They're destroying these cameras everywhere. You have groups of people that are breaking the law, running all over the UK because the mayor of London is monitoring your output, how many times you travel, what is your personal carbon footprint, and how is your industry right at the center of that? Well, because in order to have total control, obviously we know they have to control the food supply, right? They have to control your movement. That's why it's all the war on oil and all of that. And what they have created now, if you want to know how it's going to be plugged into the plan, they've created something. How many of you have ever heard of food is medicine? That's not very many people. And it's right now being implemented by this administration, funded. This year alone, the Rockefeller Foundation put $100 million into food as medicine. If you can think of a supermarket chain, they're involved. If you can think of a insurance company, medical insurance, they're involved. They've all taken part of this. Food as medicine is training tens of thousands of doctors to be nutritionists. And the concept behind it, of course, is that this is going to reduce inequities in racial disparities in access to health care. This is going to end hunger, and it's going to reduce the prevalence of disease. And how is it? Because, well, it sounds like a great idea, right? Obviously, food, you know, your body's health, your immunity, this is very important. And of course, it's tied, you know, to healthcare. What is food as medicine really about? Doctors will prescribe food for you to eat. And you'll have medically approved meals. This is being implemented. And how will they make sure that you follow that? Because the health insurance companies are also part of this. They have to know exactly what you're eating at all times, right? My sister in South Africa has health insurance with Discovery. She also has a credit card with Discovery. She was notified by email by her health insurance company that she was purchasing too much sugar at the grocery store, and it was bad for her health. They provided recipes for alternative things that she could try to make at home instead of purchasing, what was the offending item on her grocery bill? Natural fruit juices, fresh fruit juice, freshly squeezed orange juice. In South Africa, if you only purchase certain items and you don't purchase unhealthy food items, you can get points that reduce the cost of your health insurance. So people think that's a great idea. How many of you have seen the safe driving programs? You can reduce the cost of your car insurance too. Join the safe driving program. You allow these cameras to monitor your driving and report the data back. The truth is the technology is already in place. And what they are doing, they use a policy called fractionalization to little bit by little bit by little bit introduce and condition you. They shape the environment and the information environment to push you to the outcome that they want. Shad referred to this as incrementally, how the beef industry is being destroyed, right, by incremental changes. Shad, incremental, it's the same thing, fractionalization. They slowly introduce you to what they're doing. So they already have phones and iPads that wrap around your skin. A hologram pops up when you touch it. They've had that technology since the first iPad was ever released onto the market. But they didn't introduce it because it's too much of a leap. Something very interesting is happening, though, because we are now, I spoke to a man that I know who infiltrated the global cult. He spent 2.5 years underground training for that assignment for the United States government. It's the only person I know. I mean, he's had the Dead Sea Scrolls read to him in Aramaic in person. This man has read all of their texts and everything. He has studied them. They know who he is. And he doesn't speak to many people. And he told me that just a few weeks ago, that we are now in the process that is called velocitization in their plans. And can you feel it? Can you feel the speed at which things are moving? Are things coming at you constantly? Can you feel the speed with which things are being implemented? Look at what the Biden administration has done since they took office. Look how quickly they have dismantled things and implemented their agenda. I mean, you realize that in most of the public schools in America today are filled with pornography. We've gone from a tranny at the White House when Obama was elected, in the picture with Michelle Obama as her guest when at the first inauguration. We've gone from that to, in rural Texas, we're having family-friendly drag queen shows. And nobody says a word? You just participate in the mass delusion that Hunter Biden's psychiatrist talked about. Because if you're silent, if you decide, I can't handle it anymore, I'm turning off the TV, or I can't deal with it, so I'm checking out, I can only do what I can do, I understand. But I'll tell you the problem with that is what you just did is you just got on your knees and you gave up your ground. You took yourself out of the fight. Because that agenda is moving forward, whether you're moving with it or not. But there are signs that they're not moving at the pace that they want to move at. That velocitization, although it's a different phase, they have used the power and the influence of the U.S. to put in place global institutions, whether they're non-governmental organizations, which are your local government, really, if you look at it effectively, versus your World Health Organization and World Economic Forum and United Nations and all of that, which is the, that's the federal level of the global government, right? They've put all of that in place, but it's not all going their way because people are starting to recognize the tactics being used. When I was attacked for my reporting on Benghazi at 60 Minutes, nobody knew. Nobody knew that there were organizations like Media Matters for America, a bipartisan media watchdog. Please, give me a break. Funded by David Brock. People like this. These are terrible, terrible, terrible pizza. People. The reason I was thinking of pizza is because David Brock's boyfriend for 11 years was the owner of Comet Pizza, which was the center of Pizzagate. Yeah, which was real. If you've ever looked at their Instagram photos and dug into that, what you find is absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. But at the same time, what is happening is they're being exposed. And they're being exposed because people are speaking up. That's the first and most important thing, because they're not silent. Because parents are starting to go to school board meetings. And yes, fine, you can homeschool. But what happens to all those other kids? You're just going to leave them behind? Shad asked me if my children were homeschooled. I mean, good Lord. Living in my house is like living in the eye of a hurricane, okay? My children would not be functional human beings if I was the one homeschooling them, because you got a 30-year special operations veteran and a mother like me. My children don't get spared much reality in my house. I would tell my daughter bedtime stories about human trafficking and beheadings and all kinds of things. The one she said to me, Mom, I don't think my bedtime stories are like other kids. Because I forget who I was talking to sometimes. My children are so smart. And I'm so worried about what's happening that I don't always know how to shield them from the truth. Because land and liberty are not guaranteed anymore. And at the beginning of this, I told you there were two things that people don't understand about America. One was they don't understand or know anything about most of the country because they've been told that people are a little bit embarrassed about those people that live in flyover country. That's not really America. They apologize for you. They apologize for people like me, right? That's not the real America. That's what they say. And I like to tell people, if you look down the list of Medal of Honor winners from all the wars that this country has fought, they didn't all come from New York and LA, did they? No, they didn't. And I hear people sit around my dinner table all the time in Texas and they say, you know, we got our guns and they're not taking our guns and all that stuff. And I say, you know what? I can't hear you. I can't hear you because they are taking your guns every single day with these incremental changes and fractionalization. And most of the time, you're letting it happen. And they pick you off one by one. How many people were so happy they didn't go to January 6th? Because it's not their problem, right? But those people who went to the Capitol on January 6th, many of them had never seen the Capitol in their life. Many of them had little to no money. And they went and stood in the gap. That's what they did. And they were set up. And they were set up by Mitch McConnell as much as Nancy Pelosi. I spent a year working just on January 6 stories. And I can tell you, I mean, you can find my series on X, The Rest of the Story with Lara Logan. We have people who have killed themselves because of how they've been persecuted and tortured by the DOJ over January 6. Not one of those judges allowed a First Amendment defense. Every single thing that was planned by American people on January 6 was covered by the First Amendment. And those judges just, no, they just ruled, no, that's not admissible. Not admissible. Not admissible. They just arrested, in my area of Texas over the last few weeks, 11 people for January 6. Did you know that 2 to 3 people a day are being arrested still for January 6? Did you know that? No, you don't know it. Because there's an information war. And it's not being covered. You're not being told. If you don't watch those particular sites or go to certain media, you don't see that people are turning out in the hundreds of thousands across the country for Donald Trump rallies. You don't see it. Because when you see that reality, you don't believe the lie. And they don't want you to believe, they want you to believe the lie. They are creating around each one of us and our digital twin, they create feedback loops. So if we sat next to each other and we both logged into Twitter, X, I bet you would see different things trending depending on who's logging in, because they are tailor-making. AI is tailoring what you see as news, and that's called a feedback loop, and they're pushing things to you. So if you see every day that things are being exposed, right? Say you care about January 6th, justice for January 6th, and every day you see an article about that, you start to feel a little bit better, like something's being done. It may or may not be true. They may have weighted that to give you a completely different sense of it so that you take your foot off the gas and you don't fight that. The scale of what is happening in this country on a daily basis requires your full attention and commitment. As General Flynn will tell you, this is undoubtedly the most important election that has ever taken place. Take a guess how many people voted in the South Carolina GOP primary that just took place. Throw me a number, someone. What was the percentage of registered Republican voters that turned out to vote in the South Carolina primary? 13.5%. I'll tell you what's going to happen if that's the voter turnout. You're going to die. This country's going to die. Everything you've ever known, everything that you value, everything you care about is going to be taken away from you in a very short amount of time. Christians still make up like 70% of this country. What is the voter turnout in the Christian population? I think it's something like 26 or 36%. When Trump walked across the park, remember that? During all the madness at the end of his administration, remember he walked across the park and he went to that church and he held up a Bible. And the media went nuts, right? And then the traitors, General Milley and that other idiot that he had at SecDef at the time, came out afterwards and said that they were used by Trump and that they distanced themselves from any political act. And remember all of that? 22 churches were burned in Washington, D.C. in the 2 weeks prior to Trump doing that. 22 churches burned by Antifa in Washington, D.C. Where are the voices of the Christians? The churches, the pastors. Who was the foundation of this country? The 13 colonies, when you read the letters, who was the foundation of the revolution, the formation of this country? Where did they organize? They organized in the churches. We're sitting here today, everything we've ever had, because of those people, that's where it happened. And that man who infiltrated the global cult told me something. I mean, he sat in depopulation meetings that required 2 levels of security clearance to attend. He said the first one he was in, a guy got up talking about, they were having all these conversations about how we got to get rid of, I don't know, it was either 75 or 80% of the global population. And he's looking at people and he's thinking, am I the only person that thinks these people are bat crazy? Like, is this actually happening? And a guy gets up and he says, no, this is all wrong. And he thinks, whew, thank goodness I'm not the only one. And the guy says it should be more like 90%. It's a real story. This man is real. And he is absolutely legitimate. He has sat in depopulation meetings taking place at what he calls the global cult. He infiltrated the Middle East faction. The Middle East faction, think about that for a second. Veterans, 9/11 victims. Those of us who lived through 9/11, I spent 15 years on battlefields. Think about that. There's a Middle East faction. Of course there is. It's a global cult. There's a faction from everywhere. This division between us is orchestrated. It's as much to control the Islamic population as it is to control us. It's being orchestrated and manipulated along the way because you look at it and you start to realize when you see someone and they say, Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook. Listen to Mark Zuckerberg speak. He can barely put together a coherent sentence. The man didn't invent anything. Okay, nothing. He did not invent it. Did you watch the movie? Did you see the lawsuit with the twins from Yale who thought, no, nothing in there is true. It was a program developed by DARPA who figured out a global intelligence surveillance collection system that would not only be taken and accepted by all of you, but you would be the mark. You'd hold up your hand and say, please let me be the mark. You create the product every day that they sell. You create it. How much do they pay you? Oh, that's right. They don't. Every picture you post, everything you write, every message you send, you are the product. You're working for them for free. And what they're doing is taking all of that information and they're figuring out how to manipulate and control you. You're on every one of us, and I do it too. You can't extricate yourself from this because we let it go so far. You stop shopping at Target because of that. You stop shopping at Walmart because they're the same. Then you find out the HEB Foundation in Texas is funding transgender surgeries. Where am I going to get my groceries? I got to eat. I know I'm not a farmer, and my husband bought the chicken coop, but I got 5 Belgian Malinois, okay? Those chickens aren't going to last 4 seconds at my house. And I know who's going to be taking care of them. You really, really, really need to think about these things because this is our last chance. Trump is a life raft in a tsunami. That's all he is. But without that life raft, it's done. If you're one of those people standing on the bank of the river watching America drown, waiting for someone to save the nation as it screams out for help. It's not coming, right? There are whistleblowers. Tarek Johnson, Capitol Police whistleblower, he raised his hand. This is a black man who was very senior. He personally evacuated the Senate and the House. He gave up his pension. He gave up a 30-year career. Do you know what he's doing today? Do you even know his name? You want people to stand in the gap for you, but you don't even know who they are. And you don't support them when they do. He's working for a furniture removal company. One day when I spoke to him, he was so happy because they'd moved him into more of an administrative role. And he said, you know, I'm not so young anymore. Moving this furniture is killing my back. But I still can't pay my mortgage. FDA whistleblower David Gortler, 40-something years of compounding pharmacies in his family in Arizona. You've never heard of him. I testified with him at Senator Ron Johnson's Rogue Committee hearing on disinformation and COVID. This man told me of the 700 and something drugs that the FDA brings into this country every year. When they test them in their compounding pharmacy, they find things they've never seen, completely not identified. Guess how many of the 700 and something drugs the FDA brings into this country every year are actually tested by the FDA? Less than 25%. They don't even know what you're putting in your body. And how they're going to integrate all of this together that directly affects you is food is medicine. Doctors will prescribe food as medicine, but taking that will not be optional. And in order to enforce that, they have to have a central bank digital currency because they have to control what you're able to purchase and know what you're able to purchase. You can't take the veggies and go out and buy a cheeseburger. Oh, no, no. When you step up to pay for the cheeseburger, your money's no good here. You know, I just showed a friend of mine this in Nashville Airport 2 days ago. I've seen it because I travel all over the country. You know, you have those like 7-Eleven type Hudson News, you know, those stores inside the airport where you can get your medicine and magazines and drinks and whatever you need. Well, now they got them where there's lanes to enter, and they've got one of those entry things that flaps, and they have a little sensor next to it. So as you walk up to it, it scans your body, your purse, your wallet, all your cards. If you have money in your bank account and a functioning card, it goes green and it opens. You pick up whatever you want, and you walk out the other side. And as you leave, it takes the money from your account. And there's a big sign there at the exit that says, this, whatever they call it, pay system sponsored and brought to you by Amazon. That's already been implemented in this country. And you don't even know it's happening. Why? Because in information warfare, what they don't tell you about, omission, is as important as what they tell you. What they also do is they tell you things they can't possibly know. So one of the most important questions you can ask yourself when you hear something is that knowable? Classic example, Benghazi. It wouldn't have made any difference if we'd put bombers in the sky. How do you know? Yeah, from the evil one. Hillary Clinton, what difference would it make, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when General Ham and all those people were asked in Congress when they're testifying, and they all claimed completely with confidence, it wouldn't have made any difference. You can't know that because you never did it. It's that simple. You cannot know it because you never did it. You cannot imagine how many things I have uncovered because I asked myself that simple question, can this person know this? Do you remember the plethora of news articles about how Donald Trump never thought he was going to win the election? You cannot know that because you're not Donald Trump. And unless he told you personally, and he confirms that he told you personally, you're full of you know what. When people go on television or they write things, you got to ask yourself, how do they know? How do they know? And then you have to ask yourself, well, if you feel an emotional response, it's often a good idea to take a breath and come back at it and read it again. Because I can promise you, I have read their papers from 2012. I have it, and I can share it with Shad. They figured out in 2012 that the way to win on the Second Amendment was to never talk about the Second Amendment. Because if you notice, that conversation about guns never addresses the substance of the Second Amendment, does it? No. What is the only thing they talk about? Sandy Hook. I'm not talking about the pro-gun lobby. I'm talking about the anti. They don't talk about the Second Amendment. They don't talk about the Constitution. They wait for the shooting, or maybe they have a hand in the shooting, because it's very odd, some of these shooters, when you start to look at the patterns and examine them. Why all these transgender shooters? Because you've maybe taken a mentally ill person and help them along with the idea, and help them either through social media or, you know, sometimes personal engagement, put an idea in their head, maybe put the means in their hand. You think I'm making it up? Governor Whitner, the kidnapping plot in Michigan, did you see that the last accused in that were just acquitted? Thank the Lord, there is actually some justice in the world. They were giving these guys prepaid credit cards, guys who were homeless, guys who were unemployed, with $5,000 on it to go and buy weapons, and they still didn't go and buy weapons. And who was giving it to them? The FBI. Because they created a narrative, and then they needed to support the narrative. But when they do that to support the narrative, it's a lie. So when Don Lemon went on television shortly after Trump was elected, and he said that the white man in America is the greatest existential threat to this nation. Look at this report from the intelligence community. Who's carrying out more attacks? And it's not Islamic terrorism. This is back in 2016-17. Does anyone remember when that idiot did that? Watching that on CNN, and I was apoplectic. Top of my head just exploded, because I lived on those battlefields. You cannot imagine the things that I saw and what I know about those organizations, and how I tracked how the CIA, when Obama and the CIA were saying there were less than 200 al-Qaeda operatives left in Afghanistan, I had the battlefield reports, the after-action reports, issued every single day for more than 10 years. They were killing more people, according to their own reporting, in a month than they said existed in a world. They lie, and they lie, and they lie. And as much as you might already think that they lie, I can promise you it's worse. I can promise you it's worse. Because this is, like I said in the beginning, this is a war for your mind. And if they can control what you do with your money, if they can control how you do that, if they can control what you eat, and they control all the means of production, they control everything. So when you look at it, when you actually, so we believe, that communism is on the left and fascism is on the right. But communism, Marxism is fascism. You have to have fascist control over the people and production and everything, because you cannot sustain it, because it's built on a lie. And once you've stolen everybody's money and you've plundered all the resources, you've got nothing left to keep the lie going. So you have to fight it with tyranny. Chavez didn't tell everyone when he was running for office that, oh, in a few years, 80% of you will be living below the poverty line. Did he? No, they never tell you what they're going to do. But what they do is they send messages. You know why? Because in information warfare, that's called prepping the information environment. Watch, how many of you have seen the movie Civil War? One person in this room has seen the movie Civil War. You know what it's about? It's about a right-wing American who gets elected, takes over the country and dismantles the FBI and the DOJ and kicks off a civil war. Sound familiar? What did they tell you before the 2020 election? That on election night, on election day, it's going to look like Trump's winning. And when all the mail-in ballots are counted, Joe Biden's going to win. Wow. That's exactly what happened, isn't it? Except there's a little problem with that. So when you actually, it's taken years, unfortunately, for these things to be established. But when you start to look at these swing states, what you see is mail-in ballot dumps where 100% of the vote is going to Biden. There is not an honest person alive who can look you in the eyes and tell you that that is possible. It is not statistically possible. It has never happened. Just like you've never seen a cow give birth to a sheep. It's never happened. It cannot happen. That's not how it works. So the other tool that I want to give you for information warfare is when something is out of order, when it seems unnatural, it is. It's been manipulated. And look at what they've done with the entire climate conversation. The only animal on earth that we believe is unnatural and not designed for this planet is the human. That's ridiculous. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. And where have been the voices? Where are the voices of the ranchers and the farmers? Why did it take so long to get to this point? What was it you were afraid of? You need to ask yourself that question. Because I will tell you, when I was being attacked by that mob in Egypt, EMF's kids, after I'd been sexually assaulted and raped many times over, I was still fighting that assault. And I realized that I was struggling to breathe and I was dying. And the dignity that I was fighting for was long gone. So that thing that you're afraid of losing, whatever it is, it's long gone. We are in the end game. Velocitization is the last phase of the global plan. It is the last phase. And if that life raft makes it to the other side of the shore, it cannot survive the storm alone. It will take the voices of every American. And when good people stood up and went to the Capitol, a lot of us abandoned them. One of the biggest lies ever to be told is January 6th. I can promise you that. Because as a young black man, Philip Anderson said to me, who's now been charged, almost died that day, and he said to me, this government has F-16s and B-52s. If they didn't want that to happen, it wouldn't have happened. You know who else said that to me? Bernie Carrick. How many of you remember him? New York City Police Commissioner on 9/11. I called Bernie when I was working on January 6th. He's a good friend. And I said, Bernie, tell me what you would have done. Given that we already knew Antifa had boarded up, businesses were boarded up all over D.C. This wasn't the first round. They had already seen this. I said, what would you have done to secure the Capitol, given all the threats and all the things that we already knew? And the first thing he said was, where were they mounted? Washington, D.C. has mounted police units. Where were they? Why do we have mounted units? Anyone in law enforcement? You guys know. You're ranchers. You know what you can do on a horse versus what you could do on the ground. One of the most significant tools in law enforcement. There was no perimeter. If people today are being charged just for being on the grounds of the Capitol, in a restricted area or grounds, there were 5 permitted rallies on the grounds of the Capitol that day. How could you issue a permit for a rally on those grounds and then put people in jail for being present on those grounds? That's the kind of thing they're doing. I did a story about a young man, Matthew Perna, who'd never been in trouble in his life, walked through the Capitol, was in there for about 12.5 minutes. And what they did, they tried to add at the last minute a terrorist enhancement. You know what that is? That's when the government wants to make you guilty of a crime you didn't commit. They've never charged you with it. They don't have evidence of it. But right at the moment when you're going into sentencing, they want to build up the number of points you have and put you away for longer. And they're doing it every day. But there was a great victory today. Did you see it at the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court justices ruled 2-1 that the instructions given to the jury by Judge Marchand in Trump's case were 100% illegal. I'm going to tell you what my husband said. There's 3 pedophiles on the Supreme Court, and someone's got them by the you-know-what. Because they're not doing that ruling willingly. And you think I'm kidding? We are now in the season of reveal because the end is near. And accountability is coming. And your governor, someone's got her by the you-know-whats too, because she's singing like a little well-behaved canary these days on behalf of Donald Trump, because her political career is over, obviously, after the Shoot the Dog book. I'm just saying, I'm not taking a political position. But you need to ask yourselves why South Dakota is in the Panama Papers. How is there no inheritance tax in South Dakota? Isn't that a federal tax? That's kind of neat. That's a neat, right? That's a neat trick, how you pulled that off. How does South Dakota become the Switzerland of America? You're not Puerto Rico. We know how they do it in Puerto Rico. It's offshore accounts where the IRS is located, right? But how do they do it in South Dakota? It's still not legal. Trust doesn't protect you from federal law. And I'm not a fan of the federal law, believe me. I'm not saying that for 1 second. I'm saying that.
Nope. Battery ran out.
And by the way, I know it's long. If anybody wants to leave, I won't be offended. But the foxes are in the hen house is the point. You're right in the center of it. You're right in the center of it. And this is not I'm not saying this as a personal attack. The number of one firm alone in this state services 50 countries that are putting their money here. There's a reason. Something rotten. You're sitting on something very rotten. And by the way, what exactly are they doing with the Super Collider? June. You know about that, right? You don't know about that? Well, for crying in a bucket, what are you doing? In CERN, Switzerland, they've been looking where they found the God particle 10 years ago, what they call the God particle, right? Because they say that this invisible field of energy that's over the universe, if they can figure out what is driving it and what happens within this field, they have solved the questions about creation and how the planet was created, right? And so they have a partnership with South Dakota. And they are right now South Dakota's university, every university you have in this state just about is working with CERN under the June program. You can look this up. These are the people that when they had their ceremony for the Super Collider, it was a worship of Baal. They did a public display of a worship of Baal, the satanic demon. This is happening in your state. This is who your elected leaders have partnered with. Just like all the grocery stores and insurance companies have partnered with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Department of Health and Human Services to speed up the implementation of food as medicine. I would urge all of you to look at this as the greatest opportunity of all of our lives. I don't want you to walk out of here tonight feeling defeated or overwhelmed, because it depends on who I talk to. When I talk to General Flynn, I say, Mike, I'm going to slip my wrist. I'm not calling you anymore. And he laughs because he wants to keep everybody motivated. But there are other people that I talk to, and there are some very promising signs of things that have happened. We staved off the CBDC for about a month. We bought time. Those things are not happening accidentally. They're happening because people are standing up and standing in the gap, just like all of you and this organization. That's why they're happening. And school boards are being held accountable. Too many of them are not, but it is happening. It's happening on a local level and all the way up. But it's going to take every one of us. It's going to take every single one of us standing together. And I will close shortly, and anyone who wants to stay and ask questions, I'm available. What I want to tell you about is, I want to tell you a story. In that clip, you probably didn't remember, but there was an image of a rhino going by. And I was doing a story for 60 Minutes in South Africa about these corridors. This should be familiar language to you if you're reading the language of the environmentalists. Core and corridors, right, as part of the language of how they're creating core populations of animals and connecting land, so they have corridors to move and all of this. And I was sitting with some of the Zulu tribesmen who were working there and helping with the rhino capture and movement operations. And we were waiting for them, rhino, to be tracked, and they'd lost sight of it in the heat of the day. It had gone under the bushes. And these gentlemen, in broken English, my broken Zulu, we were communicating, and they asked me, this was a few years ago, not more than, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, they said, what is the internet? They had no idea. I had to explain it to them. Most people in South Africa still have a flip phone, and you have to buy data, and they make a phone call on it. They don't download apps. They don't do anything like that, because I couldn't even dream of having the money to do that. And I explained to them what it was. They were fascinated by that. And then they asked me, like, why they said, we have lots of white people come here for the animals. Why? I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, why? You know, I mean, they've grown up with the animals. They love the animals, but they want to know why so many white people and why they spend so much time and money. We got helicopters and trucks and all of that, right? And so I explained all about the rhinos going extinct and the corridors and all these things, right? And they looked at me, they said, this is very interesting. The one man said to me, because we were about 2 hours from the coast where I grew up. This is my home. We were in KwaZulu-Natal, the land of the Zulu people. And he'd never seen the ocean. He'd never been 2 hours from that patch of ground to the ocean. He'd never left that patch of ground. He was in the same village where he was born. And his parents before, all of them, they were all born there. They didn't speak, they spoke only broken English. They'd never traveled to the capital. They'd never left that village. And when I explained about the animals being driven off the land, they listened, and then they said to me, so this land belongs to the rhino? And I said, well, yes. And they said, but I was born here. Like, if this land belongs to the rhino, what land belongs to us? I have nowhere to go. And that's when a light went off, and I started to realize, what land belongs to us? Why do we have no rights to any of it? Why does somebody else always have more rights to it than us? That's just not true. How many of these false things have entered into our information world, and we just go along with them? That's what we do. Nobody even remembers that the woman who was in Roe v. Wade recanted everything she testified in that case years later on video. You can find the video. She recanted everything she said. She admitted it was all a lie. When I see Joe Biden tottering around, and I see Obama taking him by the hand and all the rest of it, and the furore in the media over it, I'm not reacting emotionally. I'm thinking about the fact that they have lied and lied and lied about this and hidden Biden as much as possible. And now he's everywhere. That is a shift from the normal pattern of behavior. So my question is why? And then I think about it. How are people reacting to this? What is the effect that it's having? Oh, so on the one hand, you're reinforcing the idea that the president doesn't actually need to have a brain because the deep state runs the country, right? The bureaucracy. Think about when that entered our movies about 20 years ago. It started to become a thing. We mock presidents. White House Down, watch that movie. Watch all those movies. See how many things there are mocking presidents. We don't talk about brave, smart presidents. So that's one part of it. They're normalizing, another information warfare tactic, that concept. But what else are they doing? They're justifying what's to come. It's a shaping operation where they prepare the information battlefield because they got to get rid of Joe Biden. And then when you look at the law and you find out that after the convention, right, once he's on the ballot, they can legally just take him off the ballot and put anyone else they want on there. Anybody else they want. They don't have to ask permission, no polls, no elections, nothing. They can put anyone they want. And that same weekend that all of this is happening, where you see Biden, Biden, Biden everywhere, who else do you see pop up on the news? Not Big Mike. No. It's another woman. It's Hillary Clinton, isn't she? Suddenly out of nowhere, Hillary's at the Democratic Convention and they're showing her off in all her glittering glory, right? So my guess would be the plan on the table right now is to take Biden off the ballot and slip who in there? Hillary Clinton. Now that's just a guess. It's an analysis based on what I'm seeing happening. Because what they want to do is justify the action that's to come. Just the way they did in 2020 with the election results. And what did they do though? There's a moment of cover-up. Every time they try, they make a move. They give up something. So when you've watched the move only, and you don't look at what they've given up, you miss the clues to who they really are. We are in the season of reveal, where you're going to start to see people for who they are. All those years, people thought Mike Pence was a conservative who supported Trump. Well, you know that's not true now, right? I hope that's not a hard sell. You're seeing people for who they really are because we're at the end. So when you see them make a move, look for what they gave up, because that's a guide to the truth. And what they gave up with Biden was an acknowledgement, but at the same time, then they claimed it was all fake. So when you see, immediately, it's like when you watch a video and say someone gets shot in that video and everybody watches where the person was shot. I replay it over and over and over, and I watch everybody else in the room. Because that's where you see the truth. That's where you see natural versus unnatural behavior and reactions. And these are simple things that everybody can do. And the one thing that each one of us can do is make sure that we play our part. Because as you know, afterwards, the day after the election is too late. So here's a simple thing, because the truth is always simple. It's a simple thing. If you look back in history, the victory speeches and the concession speeches of almost every single president who has ever led this country have been on the day of or the day after. So why not demand that now? If machines are so important because they make elections more efficient, why would you accept an election result 2 weeks later? Because what they need is time to cover up the cheat. They've padded the ballot, right? they create all these ballots in the names of illegal people and all kinds of people, dead people and whatever, because they cannot end up with more votes than voters. But they don't know exactly how it's going to turn out until the day of the election. When they're doing those exit polls, you want to know the truth? Listen to the exit polls. They're the most accurate. They don't have time to manipulate them. Those are the most accurate. And when the results don't reflect the exit polls, that's where you should look. And so what happened is they bring in those ballots in the middle of the night. And over the next few weeks, as they make the number of physical ballots match the cheat in the computers, they control the reporting systems, they control the voting systems, they control all of it, but they don't control you.
I know that's a long time.
Thank you, Laura. Oh, stand here.